ladies and gentlemen, it's nice to have you on for the September edition of the Connect and Learn series. We sincerely welcome you and appreciate your time with us, but we believe that it will be a worthwhile time. The previous two editions, the feedback has been good, so there's been an encouragement to run a third and of course a subsequent series as well. My name is Olumide Ajomale, and as I earlier teased with Venerable Adeshino, we have been co-travelers in the space of learning and development. So it's my pleasure to be the anchor of this program today, which promises great learning experience. And I will tease that this is one edition that we will literally term Unveiling the New Generation. And I'll speak to that in a while. But let me recognize and welcome our guest speaker, Ajibade Adeshino, and also many of us who are on this call. So let me introduce our guest speaker today. And I say this is unveiling the next generation. It's no coincidence that by surname, Ajibade Adeshino, I would have to reveal, is the son of Venerable Adelowo Adeshino. But he's a man that stands out in his own rights. Ajibade studied pharmacology for his first degree, and he has a master's in pharmacovigilance. He's done well for himself. At one time, he was Global Safety Manager at Roche, and currently he's an Associate Director, Process Excellence and Learning Strategies in one of the leading American pharmaceutical companies, though he lives and works in the UK. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with pleasure, as I mentioned earlier, unveiling the next generation. Something we as Africans are usually proud to say, it is where we stop that the younger ones take over. So as Ajibade steps out, it's nice to know that somewhat a baton is being exchanged at this point. So ladies and gentlemen, please warmly welcome our guest speaker, Ajibade Adeshino. Ajibade, welcome.
Morning, everyone. Just to make sure that you all can hear and see me.
Yes, we can. I can see you. Nice Perfect. To see you. And it's nice to hear you as well.
It's great to hear your voice, Uncle, and thanks for that warm welcome. I hope I can live up to the expectation and the standards that you and my dad have set over the years, and no pressure to carry on the baton, but we'll do our best to continue the race that you started before us. So welcome to everyone joining. I can see in the chat that we have, a diverse audience from a range of geographies, and really excited to go with you this morning and go through with you what we.
It will appear that your network is. Right.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. I think
okay.
We lost the MC.
Okay, if everyone on the call can hear me, I'll continue, and maybe we'll get our MC back on the call. But if everyone can hear me and the recording is going on, then we'll keep the show on. So this morning we're going to be talking about psychological safety and building high-performing and inclusive teams. And I think this is a very interesting topic to go through, especially if you look at the last two Connect and Learn series that we went through. The first one being diversity and inclusion in the first place, and the second one, which was looking at trust matters and the place of trust in workplace relationships. Now, diversity, from what we've learned in the very first session, is a fact. We can't argue with that. Inclusion, however, is a choice. It's behavioral. And over the years, we've spent time, teaching and creating awareness and appreciation of our differences. But I don't think that's enough, because we can't just do that and sit and wait for our hearts to change. we also have to take that on and actually proactively start acting on that. And I heard a quote by one of the people I'm going to reference in the talk today that says, behave until you believe. And, you know, it's not just about creating that awareness and appreciation. We need to actually start effecting those changes in our behaviors as well. So up until now, when we talk about diversity in the workplace, you're usually thinking in terms of age, you're thinking in terms of gender, and maybe some other, it was interesting being based in the UK for the last few years. And when we had the very first talk, we had, you know, diversity and inclusion being brought about or talked about from the perspective of, you know, how many Northerners, Southerners you have in the workplace. So we're not just looking at that when we talk about diversity. How about the importance that different personalities, communication styles and approach bring to the table? And you find in a lot of scenarios and in a lot of workplaces that people don't tend to speak up at work. And that's usually because they don't feel safe. And the consequences of that can be far-reaching, as a lot of studies and researches have shown. And what we're going to try and go through today in this Connect and Learn series is really looking at the idea of psychological safety and how we can create a framework that really honors the differences that people bring to a team. I'm not going to claim to be an expert in this field. I think this, my journey in this actually came about in trying to look at how to actually create that within the teams I've worked in, working in global matrix, diverse teams located across the globe, and actually trying to make sure that we can foster a place that people can truly be their best selves at work and ultimately affect the performance across the individual and also the team as well. And what I want to try and do in the session today is to raise the level of self-awareness. And there'll be a lot of questions and prompts that I'm going to bring up during the session today. And I want it to be as engaging as possible as well. So feel free to use the chat function as well, and to use to connect and engage if anything resonates with you during the session today. Okay. So this is something that I'm sure majority of people on the call will be aware of, and this was back in 1986, the Chernobyl power plant nuclear disaster that killed about 31 people and indirectly killed over 4,000 people. And this is, you know, back, I can't even do my math, but this is what, 35 years ago? And till today, and still anticipating into the future, there's still going to be a lot of work being done in terms of, you know, containing the scale of the disruption, and also the cleanup activities are estimated to be going on through to 2065. And this is something that really shocked the world. These are something that has been a case study for so many years. And one, in the analysis of these, some of the key factors that was identified as a contributor to this disaster was one, that the plant itself had an inherent unsafe design. There was a fear of authority and the need to please as well. And back then, the culture in Russia didn't encourage the raising of concerns or speaking up about mistakes as well. So there were a few things that had been noticed, but people were scared to speak up. And so consequently, one of the main causes of the disaster was in fact that the operators at the plant did not speak up about the concerns that they had. And look at this 35 years on and going into the future, we're still going to be dealing with the aftermath of this. And, you know, the cleanup of this is still going to be continued for years, and the place is going to be uninhabitable for thousands of years at least. So this is one of the worst case scenarios, or one of the really dire scenarios, but it really just shows you, you know, the effect of the lack of speak up culture and what could happen when people don't speak up about concerns that they're having in the workplace. And this one I think is more relatable. How many of us have been, if you look at the image on the right-hand side of the screen, how many of you have been in that position where you're in a team meeting, you're you know, having a discussion with your manager maybe, or among peers, and you don't feel that maybe you have a new idea about, say, about the way something should be done, or you can see something that needs to be done in a different direction, or the team needs to be moving in a different direction, but you don't feel confident enough, or you don't feel safe enough to actually speak up about that concern, maybe because you're worried about the effect it would have on your reputation, you're worried about your fear of wanting to look smart, you're worried about how people will react to it and how you should frame that idea that you have. And then you end up just leaving that meeting without actually saying anything. Everyone just, says, great meeting. You go through superficially what maybe you had to talk about, and maybe the new idea that could actually propel that company, propel that team, propel that discussion, or elevate that discussion is left on the table and not actually discussed. How many of you, I'm trying to see if I can see the chat function, but how many of you can resonate with this? How many of you have been in this scenario before? Okay. See, Radhi has been in this scenario, and the rest of us on the call probably are still in a space of not being psychologically safe and so are not communicating in the chat. But this is what we're trying to mitigate, and this is what we're trying to really, okay, there's more coming through now. We're going through to people who have been in this stage before. So this is where we then define what psychological safety is, because psychological safety is the shared belief that one can speak up with the ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes without fear of negative consequences of self-image on your status or your career. So regardless of what level you are in the organization, regardless of, seen Amelia saying dozens of times and is most frustrating. So hopefully, Amelia, after today, will provide some tips that would actually take out that frustration and get us to the point where we all feel safe to actually contribute to wherever we work or whatever teams we're part of. So the main thing here is that we have that shared belief that we can speak up, and we're doing that without the fear of any negative consequences. You're not thinking about, the impact it's going to have on your career. You're not thinking about you're the director or you're the VP in the company and you don't want to look stupid to an entry-level position, or vice versa. You've just come into a new company. You don't want to look like you don't know what you're saying, and so you can't ask questions, or you can see that they're doing something in a certain way, and there might be a better way, a better new system of doing things, but you're not able, you don't feel confident enough to say that because you don't want that negative influence consequence to backfire on you. So it can be defined as a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Okay, so this might sound very simple, but the truth is that psychological safety in the workplace is really, it's more complicated than just that. And it's also under the decline. Where there's no psychological safety in the workplace, people tend to suffer trauma. And I know that's a big word, and people tend to associate that with negative connotations. But the fact is that when people do not feel safe, it triggers a trauma response. It could trigger a flight or fight response in them. And we'll explore that in more detail further on in the line. But without that, what would happen as a result is that productivity would decrease, revenue would decrease, and innovation and performance will drop as well. So this is not a term that I have coined. The term of psychological safety was coined by Amy Edmondson. And Amy Edmondson was studying performance in hospitals. And she noted in the hospitals that she was studying that the higher reported error rates that she saw in a team meant that the team had better performance. So the teams that were not scared of reporting the errors that were made, the teams that were not hiding errors that they had been made, or covering up things that had gone wrong in their processes, actually had better performances, which is not what you would think would be the case, right? But she found that having that psychological safety made people comfortable reporting and discussing errors, and enabled the teams to learn more faster, and were able to save more lives in the hospitals that she reviewed. So this is, a show that without that psychological safety, this could translate into real physical cost to the company as well as to the individual. So we're not just talking about health problems and poor decision quality and low satisfaction, but to the company, you can then start having things like absenteeism, you can have attrition, people leaving because they don't feel safe. You would have the inability to retain your highly skilled workers because there's going to be low engagement as well. There'll be low skill acquisition, low innovation, because this is really much needed for people to be able to speak up, change the culture, change processes, and also low productivity as well. And one of the things I wanted to then create this distinction, because when I was thinking about, we talked about diversity and inclusion the first time, and then we also then looked at trust matters. What's the difference between trust and psychological safety? And trust is personal. So trust is you giving others that benefit of a doubt when you take a risk. But when we're talking about psychological safety, we're talking about others giving you the benefit of the doubt when you're taking the risk. And I think that was a key thing to distinguish between the two, because we talked about trust in the last Connect and Learn series. And so whilst this different, this is still that carry on into this session today. So we've looked at that personal attribute in terms of you giving others the benefit of the doubt. But then now we want to look at the other scenario where we want to make sure that the environment that you're in is safe for you to take those risks. And whilst it's similar to trust, it's slightly different, because now this is a collective approach. It's the shared belief, if you look at the definition, that as opposed to that interpersonal relation, we're now looking at the shared belief and the environment in which you're taking the risk and taking this decision. So psychological safety is a group phenomenon, and it's different from trust, which is looking at that personal dynamics between you and a colleague as well. And the thought leaders I'm going to be referencing here, so this is, like I said, I haven't done all this work myself. These are the books and resources that I have used in trying to, look at the teams I've worked in, or the team I'm currently working in as well, to really establish, and create this psychologically safe environment to make sure that we can foster innovation in the workplace. So Timothy L. Clark, he's got the 4 stages of psychological safety. And I'll go through those stages with you today, because I think those are the ones that really resonated with me as I was looking to build this within my team. And then Amy Edmondson, I mentioned, she coined the term, and she's got the book, The Fearless Organization, which is an amazing resource as well. And if you want to learn more following the session today, I'll definitely recommend, looking at this resource. And finally, there's a site and the work that has been done by Tom Garrity in that site as well. And that's linked as well, I think, in the resource at the end of the presentation. And these are the key thought leaders that I'm going to be referencing throughout the presentation today. And I just want to give credit where credit is due, because I'm not taking, I'm not putting this forward as the work that I've done, but I'm referencing the resources and the good research that these teams have put together on this topic. So a topic like psychological safety could seem quite hypothetical. It could seem quite, you can't really feel it. And being a scientist myself, one of the things that you want to do is starting with, after defining it, also then measuring it. And Amy Edmondson and Tom put together these questions, or these survey. That's basically a set of survey that you can use to actually try and figure out where your team is, or where your organization is when it comes to psychological safety. And like I said, I want to try, the main thing I'm trying to do today during this session is raise your self-awareness. So I want you to be thinking about this, and also put in the chat as you ask yourself these questions. So when someone makes a mistake in your team, is it often held against them? In your team, is it easy to discuss difficult issues and problems? Is that something that is easily and frequently done within teams, that people can actually bring up tough topics and discuss them without social conflict, so to speak? Are people in the team rejected for being different? So are you trying to create a monotonous audience, or a monotonous group where people who have divergent thinking, or this is where the diversity comes in. But, apart from that, in terms of the fact of diversity, we're looking at diversity of thought as well. So in the diversity of thought, are people being rejected for being different, for thinking different, for acting different? Is it completely safe for people to take a risk on the team? Is it difficult for you to ask members of your team for help? And would you think that there are people in the team who would deliberately act in a way that would undermine your effort? And finally, working with members of the team, do you feel that your unique skills and talents are valued and utilized? So these are the crux. There's a few different ones where I think there are 15 other questions, but they're all linked to these main 7 questions. And to start benchmarking on the psychological safety of your team, you then use these questions to assess true, more than true, false, right down to not applicable, to really get the pulse check on where your team is at in relation to psychological safety. And it's important to note that this is not just for direct people managers, but we're looking at leaders, individual contributors across the organization. So I'm going to try and pull up the chat again to see what people are saying, and to see where do we think we are at in our organization. So out of this 7, who thinks they're 7 over 7? Who thinks that, what are we feeling in the room, just to see where we are at as a collective on the call today, see where different people are in the stages of psychological safety in the organization. Give a few minutes or a couple of seconds for people to resonate with the questions and see what comes up in the chat. Have I lost everyone? Can you all still hear me? 5 out of 7, that is really good. 5 out of 7, we should get you to actually give a talk on this and give us some practical tips. That's a really high number. Okay, so we'll carry on just for the sake of time. So this is really important because the research that has shown, and this is by McKinsey, has shown that, you know, people, McKinsey's and Accenture as well, I should say. So it's really important because they've shown that where you have high psychological safety, you have, you know, and this is a hard fact, you have 27% reduction in turnover, you have 76% more engaging employees, 29% more life satisfaction, 57% of workers are more likely to collaborate, and 50% more productivity. That alone is a huge number that if you can create a psychologically safe team, that you are liable to increase productivity of your team by almost 50%. 74% of the people who were involved in this research had less stress, and 26% had greater skills preparedness because they were able to learn at a faster rate when they felt safe. And 67% had a high probability that the workers will apply the newly learned skill that they've learned on the job. So really now taking that people are able to learn, they're able to contribute, people are able to, you know, first of all, this increases your likelihood of innovation. So if you're, say you're a drug manufacturer, this is a faster time to market for the products you make. You're increasing the ability for people to learn from their mistakes, and this will result in fewer problems or outages, result in higher quality and improved governance. So this is really important because companies that are more likely to, psychological companies are more likely to innovate quickly and unlock the benefit of diversity. So it's not just, you know, having that diversity we talked about and having that appreciation of it, but we want to unlock that potential that comes with having that diverse workforce. And so you don't take my word just for it. This is also something that Google also was looking at a few years ago. So Google had embarked on a project called Project Aristotle, and they were looking to find out what really made effective teams, what made the perfect team. And they carried out this analysis over 2 years. They interviewed and analyzed data from over 180 teams within the company for 2 years. And the researchers found out that what really mattered was less about who was on the team and how about how well the team worked together. And the top thing that they found out that was important was psychological safety, that the team members felt safe to take risk and were vulnerable with each other. So in this research, they found out that, you know what, the location of teammates don't matter. So sitting in the same office, and this is important, especially post-COVID, where we're all scattered around the globe, people are working from home. So they found out that that was not the most important thing. Consensus-driven decision making wasn't, you know, the top thing which you would expect. Extroversion of team members, which is also something that's also been argued as well over time, you know, introverts versus extroverts. And all of these things matter. The key things that mattered was, one, psychological safety. That was the top thing that mattered. They also had dependability, structure and clarity, meaning, impact, rate highly in the skill, but the top thing here was psychological safety. And so what exactly is this and how do you build that in your team? So this is taken from the work of Timothy Clark. And Timothy, he's proposed 4 stages of psychological safety. The first stage is inclusion safety. Do you feel included? And from inclusion safety, that's the foundation. Without inclusion safety, you can't really go on with psychological safety. You can't go on with building a psychologically safe team. You need to make sure that you feel included and you feel part of the team. And then the next level of psychological safety, according to team, is learner safety. Are you growing? Are you learning? Are you expanding? And that's moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, right? And then the third level is contributor safety. And now you've taken all the learning that you've you've been included, you've done a lot of learning, you're growing, but are you actually making a difference? Are you contributing? Do you feel valued, and are your contributions being valued and acknowledged in your team and in your workplace? And finally, the ultimate level for psychological safety is learner challenger safety. And this is when, this is the highest level. This is when you're challenging the status quo. This is where innovation happens. This is where people have, the confidence, people have they feel safe enough to challenge what's the current status quo, whatever it's the process, whatever it is, the way things have always been done, shifting from that mindset of we've always done it this way to actually innovating. And this is the ultimate pinnacle of psychological safety. And with psychological safety, there's two things here that come to mind. And when you start building this within your teams, so you have your respect and permission. So in typical organization where it's hierarchical, where you have either a paternalistic approach, is where you maybe have high respect in the team, but the permission is low. So they acknowledge what you're bringing to the table, but then you're being coddled, you're being restricted in terms of what you can do, and then you feel they give you that level of respect, but you don't have that freedom to actually innovate, that freedom to think about outside the box. And then you also have, on the different scale of that, you also then have exploitation, where you have high permission, but your respect is low. And you find that where you have organizations where they're trying to extract as much as possible from you, but with little respect. So that's the boundaries of when you go outside the bounds of psychological safety, you can either be paternalistic or you fall into the range of exploitation, where you've given that permission, but you don't have that respect, and you're just extracting as much as you can from people. But we want to be within the bounds of psychological safety and use this approach, use these ladders from inclusion to learner to contributor to challenger safety, and use that to develop high performance teams. And now I'm going to go into detail of each of, going to try and go into detail of each of these levels of psychological safety. So the first one, inclusion safety, requires that we condemn our negative bias, arbitrary distinction, and destructive prejudice that refuses to acknowledge our equal worth and the obligation of equal treatment. And so if we start from the beginning, when we talk about inclusion safety, you're being part of the team, you're being included. And it's a natural human need to feel included. It's a natural human thing to want to be part of the tribe, right? But why do we as humans, why do we exclude each other? Why do we have this sense of otherness where you're there, I'm here? And what do you think drives that in the workplace? So Radhi is saying in the chat, I like these stages as there are levels of safety, and this gives you the language to categorize. I agree, Radhi, because like I said, this was from Tim, and Amy has a different approach, but I like these levels of stages as well. But just to also try and get some engagement here. So why do you think we as humans exclude each other? Why do you think that we're not necessarily just inclusive by default? Fear of differences, yes, that's a good one. And if we take that fear of differences a step further, why do we fear differences? I would argue that it's because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught that, then that we have that socialization and that acceptance of cultural workplace biases. Okay, that's another one. But insecurity, fear of differences, cultural workplace biases. Insecurity is actually on my list. That's a really big one. So we exclude based of our fear of differences, based on insecurity, arrogance, greed, fear. But this is all. I love what we're having here in terms of. I love the inferiority complex coming up. the unconscious bias because of socialization. 100% agree with that. And so yep, it requires intentionality. 100% agree with that as well. So this is really important, because if we now take this to another level of questioning, and we think about how do we justify this, you know, the biases that we have is based on race, it's based on age, gender, religion, culture, our socioeconomic status. If I drive in, you know, with a BMW versus if I'm driving in a small Peugeot 306 or something, the way I'm viewed is different. If I'm, you know, I come in as a white man versus a black man, the way I'm viewed is different. And these are all unconscious biases that we have because of socialization, as Radhi said. And so if we are not actively including people, and I love this quote by David Rock, if we're not actively including people, we are going to be probably excluding people accidentally. So if you take a minute to unpack that, we all have our unconscious biases. We have that socialization and that social conditioning, depending on where we were brought up, our geographical location, where we grew up, depending on the schools we went to, the crowd we've associated ourselves with. And if you're not consciously including people who are outside of that group that you're in, you're probably going to be excluding people. So, and one of the things I loved when I was thinking about this was also, even we exclude people based on hardship superiority, right? And this is something you see in the workplace where I've been in industry, it's been quite a while now, but I've been in industry for 11 years. But when you start getting into senior management, you get people who have been in the company for years who have, you know, twice your age, 2-3 times your age, and then they basically think that you've had it easy, right? And so because they've suffered more than you in the workplace, they feel like that gives them a right to exclude you in certain decision making, or feel like you maybe don't have the wealth of experience that they have in the ever-changing environment that we find ourselves in. So there's a very long list of why we exclude ourselves, or why we as humans tend to, you know, default to that, and why we don't have this as our default behavior to be inclusive. But I want us to actually start thinking about ways, and I'm going to put some questions. So all of these ideas, all of these reasons that we put up to exclude ourselves is basically what they've termed as junk theories of superiority. So we want to feel superior, we want to govern ourselves based on these junk theories of superiority, because I'm either richer than you, or I went to a better school than you, I went to Harvard, you went to Hertfordshire, and these are basically exclusive behaviors that then come to play without maybe us being conscious of it. We had someone say something about inferiority complex, and I think that's also really important to call out here, because the other thing we find as well in the workplace is that you, as a leader, you want to start, you know, you want to exert your leadership, and you use that position of leadership to feel secure in yourself, and so you don't. That in itself is demonstrating inferiority complex, and you use that to actually exclude people in your team. So you want to start thinking about that level of acceptance and that level, your own level of confidence, and not using your role, not using your degrees, not using where you are and what you've gotten to actually exclude people in terms of when in creating a psychologically safe environment. And very quickly, I'm just going to put some questions here to like spark us to think, because again, one of the key things for me, or one of my main objectives, is to really create an extra level of self-awareness. So do you treat people you consider lower in status to those who are high in status? And ask yourself, why do you do that? Do you feel like you can get more from them? Do you feel like the people of lower status, in quote, have nothing to offer you? Do you acknowledge and show sensitivity and appreciation for cultural differences that exist in your team? Because that could result in divergent thinking, right? That results in different new ideas coming from different people from different backgrounds. Do you feel superior to other people? And if so, why? So this is then bringing it home again and asking yourself why. Is it because of your degree? Is it because of your background? What conscious biases do you have? And you start bringing these to the forefront. Where do you exercise the soft forms of exclusion to maintain barriers? And as an individual, my screen's been blocked here, so I can actually see what what's on my screen, but what individual groups that you having a hard time including, even if they're doing you no real harm. So the standard for inclusion should be, as long as no one is causing harm, they should be included, and that should be part of our, this is where we should start going to in changing our thinking to create create the first stage in psychologically safe environments. Okay. And as an idea, as leaders, the three things here that you can do to actively start, building inclusion safety is, one, invite people, to invite other opinions, ask people's opinion, make sure people have a seat at the table, also share your experience as well. So invite, ask, share, and these are all things that will start, embedding the concept of inclusion safety within your teams. And as leaders, it's also important to amplify different ideas as well that you hear from within your teams, and also give credit to people as well. Okay. I'll quickly check the chat just to make sure I haven't missed any comments. Okay. So the next level of in our approach to psychological safety is learner safety, and I particularly like this one. This is one of the ones I've spent a bit of time in, and also worked in my team, with my team. So I'm hoping that we have people on the call who would understand these images I have on the screen here. But you have on the left-hand side, you have Adele, who recently brought up her school teacher, who really helped her, I think, with her English, I think it was, and helped her actually become the amazing lyricist and singer that she is today. You have Harry Styles as well, who is a pop star who brought up his first teacher and basically paid tribute to her as well in front of 70,000 people. And you also have Oprah, the queen of talk, daytime television, who was so emotional when she was surprised with her fourth grade teacher who was brought on stage, and that woman apparently instilled the confidence in her she didn't have as a child. So have you ever had a teacher, a mentor or coach that has provided and encouraged and had confidence in your ability to learn more than you did, even when you had those doubts? And quickly in the chat, if you want to just put some anecdotes on how that has influenced your motivation and your effort in learning something, or if it was a new role. I'm just really curious to see what people have to share there, because I'll give my example, and I'm going to give credit to Mrs. Oladaji, who was my chemistry teacher in secondary school. I struggled with organic chemistry, and this woman saw something in me that I at the time did not think I was going to be able to go through organic chemistry. It was a massive pain point, I remember. And I remember this session with her in a hallway where she picked me up and just had a heart-to-heart conversation with me and gave me some tips to study and how to, make it more practical for me. And that really changed my approach to actually studying chemistry. And without that, I probably wouldn't work in the pharma industry like I do today. So that was someone who really inspired me and gave me that confidence when I didn't. That was a crucial point in my learning and in my journey that made a pivotal change in my approach to studying, and definitely made an impact on me today. So I've got someone here who has got a couple of quotes here. I need to just scroll up to read. So Radi is talking about growing up in South Africa and with having a bias against the white Afrikaans culture. We have someone else talking about their teacher as well, the lecturer at university. That's Radi as well, talking about her lecturer at university. So I would argue that we all have had a coach, a mentor who has provided us with learner safety at one point in our life that gave us that confidence that we were able to do what we thought we couldn't do. And so learner safety is basically allowing us to feel safe and engage in all aspects of the learning process, again, without fear of being embarrassed, without feeling marginalized. And this includes asking questions, it includes giving and receiving feedback, it includes experimenting and even making mistakes, and not if but when we make them. Because we're moving our approach from thinking that mistakes or failure is a bad thing, but knowing that these would occur, we're bound to make mistakes, things are bound to fail, and expecting that and not using that as blockages in our approach to learn and also foster psychological safe environment for our teams. So we want to feel safe in all aspects of the learning process, because if we don't feel safe, if you think about it, we have our thinking brain and we have our feeling brain. When we go into our thinking brain, when we start feeling fear, when the pain centers of our brain are activated, we start acting from a defensive mode. We tend to get defensive in our approach versus when we feel psychologically safe, right? So we want to be able to foster an environment where people can learn, people are able to make mistakes, and this is an important part of this is actually giving feedback and being vulnerable in that moment as well. So learner safety requires a much higher level of psychological safety. So we're moving away from inclusion safety and a higher level of psychological safety. And it involves taking risk, and there's that emotional exposure, which is vulnerability. And so learning is therefore not just going to be intellectual, but you also have an emotional aspect of that because you have that risk reward analysis as well. So you're now, as a leader, you're giving your direct reports, you're giving your team the encouragement to learn in exchange for engagement to learn as well. So they're encouraged to learn, and then they have to engage with that learning as well. And then in that engagement with that learning, they're not going to be thinking about, oh, if I'm going to do this, there's going to be a fallback to me for saying this or for bringing this experience to the table. And one thing I forgot to mention in inclusion safety, and I do want to mention here, especially when we talk about asking questions and giving feedback, and it's something my team have also given me feedback on, especially as we work in a global environment, and for those of us who work in the COVID world now and are working from home, is your non-verbal cues, especially when giving feedback and receiving feedback. So sometimes I'm very guilty of this, where if I'm on a call with Teams or on Teams or Zoom, and if I feel like maybe what's been said, it's not mentally stimulating at that point, I check out and it's visible on my face. And the team members then automatically don't feel safe enough to actually engage. They don't feel safe to actually participate. So when we're talking about inclusion, I didn't mention it, and I meant to say that in the other slide, but that's something very important to be mindful as well, our non-verbal cues. So as leaders, when we're creating learner safety, one of the key things, like I said, is receiving and giving feedback. So you need to be very conscious of that, asking questions, giving feedback, constructive feedback, targeting experiments to people, and changing the approach of thinking about things as things must be successful. If you change the approach and take it as an experiment, it could be successful, it could fail, but you learn from it and you learn to deal with that failure. You would get teams who are who feel safer to ask more questions, and then build new processes or change things or experiment based on that, knowing that they feel safe to deal with the outcome of that, regardless of what it is within that team. And again, you're moving away from a fixed mindset here to a growth mindset. And this is really important. And with my teams, one of the few things that we've done, for example, is giving 2 hours every other Friday, because it's not enough to just say that we want to create this environment where people can learn, but also giving them that space, giving them that like I said, giving that encouragement to learn in exchange for that engagement. So we give them 2 hours every other Friday of their time. They choose when they take that time, and they choose what they're going to learn, right? So it's not driven by the employer, it's not driven by the manager. It's not that we need to learn how to build we need to learn how to create something new for this particular purpose. It's completely self-directed learning. And then people are able to expand their horizon, they're able to expand their thinking approach, they're able to expand the experiences, and that will result in divergent thinking in the workplace as well. That's the aim for that. And with that, you also provide, with learner safety, you're also providing, one of the things we've also done is provided project banks, experiments and rotations, and change their approach with certain things where we take them as small scale experiments and use that term so that people feel safe enough to engage in it, safe enough to go and experiment and actually learn. So we're not a prescriptive process that we've given them to do X plus Y equals this, but figure out how to do things on their own and figure out how to maybe question the challenge or the situation they were in, to learn and propose new ideas, and not, no idea is invalid in that scenario. And then inviting everyone to teach as well. So not just thinking that as a leader you have all the answers, but allowing people to learn, allowing people to have that space, but then inviting them back and having them give them that space to also teach and feel part of the process as well. So this is something that I find very, I take very, very, very seriously when it comes to building psychological safe environments, because I think this then leads on to the next approach very nicely. When people are able to feel safe to learn, they don't feel marginalized, we're asking questions, we're giving and receiving feedback constructively, and not, they're not personal or targeted aim feedback, but really constructive feedback, and knowing that people can feel safe across the learning process to contribute. Any thoughts in the chat? Mentors motivate and inspire, otherwise they unfortunately will be tormentors. I love that. I like when you create the space, it shows intention and allows for inclusion and equity. That's a great one. And I think that's really important, creating that space. It's not enough to just say that, we want you to do this. As an organization, as a leader, you also need to create that space, because if they don't see you, if they don't see that encouragement to learn, they can't engage, or they wouldn't engage if that encouragement isn't, you might have some self-starters who will do that regardless. But if we're trying to, create this psychologically safe environment, as a leader, one of the things you need to do is provide that encouragement to learn in exchange for their engagement to learn as well. Excuse me. Okay, so in keeping with the typical fashion, I've got some questions that would, spur some thinking within you. So does your team punish failure, or do you punish failure as a leader? And do you model vulnerability in your own learning? And as a leader, this is so crucial. How many times as a leader do you feel confident or bold enough to say, I don't have the answer to this, I'm willing to go back to learn and bring this back, or delegate that to someone in your team? Do you feel like as a leader you always need to have the answer? Because that's another way where if you don't channel, or if you don't demonstrate that vulnerability within your team, you're not going to be able to foster this learner safety within your teams as well. So do you model that vulnerability in your own learning? That's really important. And what's your approach to dissent, right? As a leader, what is your reaction to dissent? What's your reaction to when someone brings a different idea to the table, or questions a decision that was being made because there was maybe a better way of doing it? So these are things that we also need to be, as leaders, be able to channel and model within our teams as well. Do you encourage members of your team to take learning risks? When you're working with people, do you judge their aptitude immediately, or do you suppress that impulse? And this is something that, coming from an academic background, we tend to do that, judging people's aptitude to react immediately and not giving them space to settle in, assimilate, and then perform. How can you lower the barrier of learner anxiety to the point that the most inhibited and fearful member of the team will come forward and engage? Is that something you do offline with them directly, one-on-one? Is that something you do with, pairing them up with a mentor? These are things that you can think about in learning, lowering that barrier of learning and anxiety, and really helping people who are the most quiet people in your team, who might have brilliant ideas, or the anxious members or fearful members of your team who maybe have had previous leaders in the past who they've spoken up in meetings and have had a detriment to their career. And you want to be careful around how you manage that, look at the landscape and see how you can lower that barrier within your team. Do you demonstrate an aggressive or self-directed learning disposition? Do you move screen around? Do you embrace a humble learning mindset? Do you show an ability to learn from anyone, regardless of rank or influence? And actually, this one is really important, and I'll share another example. I'm hoping I'm not running against time. So with this one, I think this is really important. I started a rotation recently in a different team where I had, worked to the point in my career where I had risen to the rank of an associate director, and I wanted to learn a few different skills, and I was moving to a new team on a rotation to learn those skills. And the mentors assigned to me in that team was a manager level, which is a few levels below mine. Now, would I show an inability to learn? Will I say, oh, I can only be mentored by someone who is director or higher than my position? Or will I show that humility to learn from someone who, regardless of the rank or influence in that role, they have more experience than I do, and they have the ability to teach me and learn from them. So you need to be able to show that ability to learn from anyone, regardless of the rank or influence that they have, and model that for your team as well. Okay, see that we've got people dropping off, so I'm just going to speed up to the next one, which is contributor safety. And with contributor safety, this is now taking what we've done in the first 2 levels and then getting people to be active participants in the process. And the contributor safety satisfies our basic human need to matter, because we need to be able to make a difference. We need to be able to participate in the value creation process. So it's about our respect for the individual's ability to create value. So what we also say here is that you're giving guided autonomy in exchange for results. So you're not micromanaging others, you're giving them that autonomy to really be part of the process, the value creation process. Again, the key term there is guided autonomy, right? So you still have some guidance being provided to them. You still have that encouragement in exchange for the effort and result that you're expecting, but you're not micromanaging them. You explain the how, you delegate the why to them, help them find their why. You're not micromanaging them, but helping them understand why that's crucial and how they can perform. And then very importantly, also recognizing their efforts, right? As a leader, not taking the work as your own. And we find that a lot of, millennials and Gen Z in the workplace struggle with this, because they feel like the bosses, their mentors are giving them the work and taking credit for it. But you want people to really foster contributor safety. You need to, first of all, get rid of that inferiority that we mentioned in the start, that junk superiority complex, and making sure that you're also recognizing the effort for the people in the team who are contributing. Okay, so as part of our self-awareness checks here, so we're asking, do you collaborate effectively with other members of your team? Do you respect only the high achievers, which is something that we tend to do? Like we reward the high achievers. When we're doing that interviews, we look at the highly educated. Or do you recognize that we can have insights and answers from people, from the most unlikely people, the quietest people in the room, the people who didn't go to the Ivy League schools? And we need to really look at that process in our hiring, look at that process in our assignment of tasks within the team as well, because that tends to also happen within teams. Can you be genuinely happy for the success of others? Do you empower others without micromanaging them? And have you ever withheld contributor safety from someone when they have earned it? And because that's going to create a roadblock, right? If someone feels like they've been contributing, they've gone through the learning process, they're contributing, but they don't feel that recognition, they don't feel that acknowledgement of their efforts. Do you freely share your experience, knowledge, and skills in bringing up other people as well? And are you emotionally advanced beyond needing to hear yourself talk? And this applies to the younger people as well in the workplace as well. And finally, do you see the potential of others on your team in terms of developing them as well? So a key thing here when we talk about contributor safety, it's our basic human need. We want to feel like we matter. We want to feel like we're making a difference. And as leaders, as managers, we want to give that guided autonomy to our direct reports, to our teams, in exchange for those results. We want to explain the how. We want to give them that insight, delegate the why, help them find their why in relation to the how, and then recognize their output when they do that as well. Okay, check the chat quickly to make sure I'm missing people. Okay, media is saying guided autonomy should resonate with that. I'm glad to hear that. And invite, ask, share. Exactly. So even though we said there are layers to this, and that's an important point. So we started from inclusion safety, and now we're contributor safety. You would see that these will be transferable and there'll be ebbs and flows, right? It doesn't mean that you need to first do all, create learner safety before you move to contributor safety. You will find that you're already going to be doing work here whilst you're still including, whilst you're still creating learner safety across these 4 pillars. You can still be doing work across them. You're not just building one first and then moving to the other. So you're not going to wait till you feel like you've included everyone, so you get to that point where you only exclude those who cause harm to you before you get to learner safety. You're going to be moving across these 4 pillars as you begin to build your psychologically safe team. Okay, and for the last pillar, or the last ladder in our approach to building psychological safety, we've got challenger safety. And this is the ultimate, right? This is where you've reached the peak, and this is where you feel safe to challenge the status quo without retaliation. or without the risk of damaging your personal standing or reputation. And you will normally know when you've reached this stage in building your psychologically safe team, where you feel, when you hear questions like this very often. So why did we do it this way? How about we try it differently? Or what if we tried it this way? Or may I suggest we do a better way of doing this with X, Y, Z? So this is regardless of who is there, you know, so it's not like people only ask these questions when they're dealing with their subordinates. You would see this regardless of the meeting venue, regardless of who is present. People feel safe enough to ask these questions respectively, right? You're not challenging people in terms of their personality. You're challenging, you're trying to create that intellectual friction. And that's what this diagram in the top right corner of the screen is actually there to represent, because as leaders, your job is really to increase, so you can see the arrows going up for the intellectual friction. Your job is there to increase the intellectual friction in your team while simultaneously reducing the social friction. Because whilst we want to create some dissent, we want to create some challenger safety, we want people to be able to question things, at the end of the day, at the end of every core idea, the core of every idea, at the core of every project, you're still dealing with humans and with social beings, and we have to interact. So you want to preserve the individual in that reaction, so you don't trigger their flight or flight instincts. You're not triggering their self-centered instinct, because remember what we said, that when that happens, when they move to the place of fear, they're going to be acting from that defensive mechanism, right? But you want to still be able to encourage intellectual friction where you have the best minds rubbing against each other to create, to innovate, because this is where innovation happens, right? So without getting to this point in challenger safety, we're going to not get all the benefits of the innovation and the new ways of doing things and the productivity, the 50% productivity we mentioned at the start. So this is the ultimate goal in challenger safety, where as leaders, you're going to increase your intellectual friction within the team and reduce the social friction in the team. So again, questions here to spark your thinking around this is, do you allow others to challenge you as a leader? Do you give them a license to dissent and disagree? Do you get defensive or take things personal when people give you constructive, and emphasis on constructive feedback? We don't want disruptive teams as much as, again, we want that friction. We don't want disruptive teams that will, you know, result in the social friction. Do you maintain your poise or composure under pressure? And the whole thing about psychological safety is about us also getting to a certain level of emotional intelligence, right? Because regardless of what's happening as a leader, regardless of what's happening within your team, you need to be able to have that, maintain that poise, that composure, tolerate a high level of candor, but still pull back, you know, preserve the individual and, you know, caution where people are getting to personal, you know, stay more in the intellectual friction remit. Are questions welcome on your team? Do you feel the risk of ridicule on your team if you're bringing question? And when was the last time you were brave and you challenged the question, the status quo? Like I said, you know, when you want to know where you've gotten to this level, is that you know, there are creative aberrations in your team, there's constructive dissent, there's a license to innovate, and people feel empowered to ask the questions like, why do we do it this way? What if we tried it differently? And also suggest better ways of doing things, okay? I'm conscious of time, so I've sped through that one, but I'm going to quickly look at the chat again to see if there's any, I don't think there's any new notes in there. Okay, and I'll just quickly share on this as well, that one of the other things we've done is also creating a portal for people to put in ideas, right? We have innovation agents within different teams, and we have people who put in ideas, and we discuss these ideas. And we're not saying one is better than the other in any sense, but we're really just having that, again, intellectual friction. Someone might bring an idea for something on this process, another person brings that, and we look at it as a team, we discuss it and determine the best way forward. And that's something that's been working well in, you know, getting us to this challenge of safety, making sure people feel safe. We still acknowledge them, we acknowledge the questions, we acknowledge the suggestions of doing things a better way, but also sometimes you as a leader, you're then able to also provide rationales, right? Why you haven't done it that way, or why that might not work in the grand scheme of things. or where the vision of the company or the vision of the team is going that you've not communicated clearly, you'll be able to see that and make sure that that is also being seen and disseminated within the members of the team. So to wrap this up, I'll pause for questions, but to wrap this up, in building psychological safety teams, we are not creating a shield from accountability. People are still going to be held accountable for the actions. So it's really important to stress that. And psychological safety is not creating a whole motley cuddle. It's not just nice cuddling and waiting for a consensus decision making, or we're really not going there. That's not the crux of what psychologically safe environment is meant to do. You're really helping to make sure that there's that shared belief in your team that people can speak up with ideas and questions without that fear of negative consequences, right? So you're not shielding people from accountability. You're not overly being nice or cuddling or waiting to get the general, everyone's on the same page to make decision making or an end autonomy, political correctness. That's not the goal here. We're really looking at ensuring, one, do your people feel included? Do you feel included? Two, learner safety. Are you learning? Are you growing? Are you moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? Three, are you making a difference as to contribute to safety? And four, are you challenging the status quo? And one of the things that happens in dealing with my team with this is that they always expect things to come from the top, which, in an ideal world, it would always come from the top. But we all have the power to start effecting some of this change within ourselves. So really, the first thing in terms of leadership and thing I say to my team is, first of all, you need to lead yourself. And in leading yourself, you need to start incorporating some of these behaviors and questioning yourself. And that's why those questions are there, because you want us to all start with ourselves. So we start with leading ourselves, leading the team, and then leading the business. So with all of that, the primary concept there is using our emotional intelligence for ourselves, our team, and business, that we then create an environment where everyone feels welcome to contribute. Everyone feels welcome to share new ideas, new questions without that negative consequences or risk to their self-image, their status, or career. So thank you all for listening. I hope you found this insightful. And I'll pause here to see if we have any questions on the call or in the chat.
Thank you very much, Ajibade. Brilliant stuff. Did you say when you started that I hope I'll live up to the expectation? You surely have, and even surpassed it. I'd like to say congratulations for this very, very insightful delivery. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have indeed enjoyed this, please give a virtual clap or a thumbs up. And of course, please, thank you, Ajibade. Great learning. And I would tell you that I somewhat underestimated this topic. What you've done is you've wrapped many things around our dealings in the workplace, working in teams, and even great learning for us as individuals. Some key things you mentioned, and I think it's very important here. Are you creating psychological safety for people who work with you? That's one key question for us as leaders. And the other side of the coin is, are we as team members creating psychological safety for everyone around us? And also, are you safe yourself? So very, very key lessons to learn. I like the fact that you broke down what to do around inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, and for me, the great one is the challenger safety. Can you encourage people? Are they safe to challenge the status quo? That's at the heartbeat of how teams can become innovative, how teams can break barriers, and of course, ultimately have productive organizations. So one more time, welcome. So let's have the questions come in. Let's have the questions come in. I see Joshua, you say excellent. Sheila, you say superb tonic. Professor Babajide Alo, thank you. Awesome learning experience. Thank you. Amelia, thank you very much. Several hand claps there. Anyton Peters, very interesting and educative. I agree with you absolutely. Awesome. That's what Patience says. I have gained a lot of insight. I do say that I confirmed. Who else is saying awesome here? Bolanle Ajibade, you simply just summed it up one word, awesome. Anyton Peters, thank you so much. That's what you said. And Juliet, wow, it's been an enlightening and educative session. Bravo, bravo, bravo. So let's take questions. Does anybody have any question you'd like to ask? And if you do, I'd like you to raise your hand. I see Adelaja Adeshino, proud uncle. So is that a hand to ask a question or to give a commendation? You may unmute.
Okay, thank you very much, moderator, for recognizing me. And Jibade, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Of course, I'm not surprised because the apple does not fall far from the tree. So it's very, very insightful what you have shared with us this morning. But, you know, my concern is that the audience is, because I was just thinking, these are the kind of things that the people that are running the affairs of Nigeria, our country, should be hearing and bring it to bear in the way we relate and run our country. So the question may not necessarily be directly to you, but to the organizers of this interaction, because this kind of engagement can actually change the narrative for the governance structure and the system that we're running in the country. So are there efforts in the direction of engaging, first of all, the civil service at different levels in Nigeria? Then maybe we can extend it to the legislators and even the presidency and the state government. So is there any effort so that this bundle of information that can transform the society is not just limited to this space, and we can put it out there for every one of us to benefit? So that's my little contribution and concern. Again, I say, Jibade, thank you very much. Very, very insightful, very, very educative. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think I would leave that response to the organizers.
Thank you, Laja. And I will have everybody, please note that. And of course, I'm sure Venerable Additional can also provide an insight as pointed us to. Laja, thank you very much. Again, like they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Are you not part of that tree? All right, then. Thank you. There's a question from Professor Babajide Alo. He says, where should we place tolerance in the leaders factor hierarchy? So Jibade, please note that. And let me see. Okay, so Juliet says, just concerned that many of us in this part of the world are just getting to know about the dramatic changes in the workplace. And I wonder where the line could be drawn between psychological safety in the workplace and the individuals abusing the opportunities to express themselves. So you got three things to respond to right now, and then we'll be back to take additional questions or comments. Ajibade, over to you.
Thank you, sir. So the first one was, where does tolerance sit in the leaders factor? Can you just repeat that?
Let me call that up again. This is just 1 second. Where should we place tolerance in the leaders factor hierarchy? And I may call on Professor Alok to kindly unmute and maybe just shed a bit more light as to where this question is coming from. Prof, It'd be nice to hear your voice. And it'd be nice to know whether you're in Nigeria.
Greetings from Canada.
I said it. I said it. The traveling prof. Welcome, sir. Good to hear from you. So, would you like to shed some insight as to where this question is coming from?
Where it's coming from, if I look at the leaders' factor in psychological safety and in mentorship, in leader inspiring, and the challenge of a subordinate being able to make a case. Invariably, it is usually a tolerant leader that gives room for everybody to be able to speak, to be able to speak their mind, to be able to place issues on the table in the team. And I saw that all through Jibade's presentation, he did put emphasis on that. And that's why I thought it might be useful to put some insight that the issue of tolerance for leaders, we need to play it up. Many leaders are intolerant or subordinate. Many leaders don't give room for people to be able to participate in organizational improvement. So this is why it was just to provoke some kind of discussion,
additional discourse. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You hear that? So
yes, I do, and I now understand where that's coming from, and I hope you can still see my screen. I brought it back to this slide here on inclusion safety. So when we talk about tolerance, I think I will link it back to inclusion safety, because where you have leaders who don't feel included, who are intolerant, or who don't feel like they can't bring their subordinates along the journey, I would go back to what we talked about, the junk theories of superiority, where we are governing ourselves based on these junk theories of superiority. So looking at insecurity, looking at arrogance, greed, fear, understanding what that is first, because why is that leader not being tolerant? Do they feel insecure in their role? Do they feel like I said something earlier, and I'll shed some more light on that maybe, but that one thing I've seen in my career, even though I haven't worked in Nigeria at all, and it's something I imagine is going to be prevalent in Nigeria, is this hardship superiority, where because it took you X number of years as a leader who, to get to where you are, and I've been in the industry for X amount of years, and now I'm at that same level, you don't feel like I'm worthy of being included in certain conversations because I didn't work as hard, in quotes, as you have. So for me, that question of tolerance will still come back to our whole concept of inclusion safety, because if we don't feel tolerant, then we need to understand where that is coming from within ourselves, and that's having that level of self-awareness as well, having that understanding of what it is that we're not tolerating, and if it's something that we need our direct report to change in terms of there's a character behavior or there's a misunderstanding in their understanding of processes, that's a whole different thing. But if we're not being tolerant based on this junk theories of superiority, we've called it, then we're not being inclusive, right? And that goes to the very foundation of the whole thing, where we need to be actively including, otherwise we are excluding. And I hope that answers the question, at least shed some additional light on that, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think something else, Ajibade, that we may add to this, and Prof may also share this, maybe from the environment we're in, leadership is probably seen very hierarchical, and it is my turn to be here. And one sign of, in quotes, authority is you must be subservient. So you can't challenge the status quo, right? Yeah. Otherwise, it's considered as a disrespect for leadership. You really can't ask to be at the table. That's not your calling. But I think all of this now begins to speak to that inclusion means
allowing people come to the table, and it doesn't disrupt your ability to lead. You are a better leader the more you can have people who can bring different perspectives to the table to challenge. We're richer by it. And so maybe to provide for that side to Prof, in that an intolerant leader simply shuts themselves away from the benefits of psychological safety that if they had allowed happen. And chiefly, like Ajibade has pointed out, you don't allow innovation happen. You don't have people who are willing to go the extra mile, as it were. And you just feel a demoralized set of people who are just being tagged along. And that doesn't help productivity at all. And I think this is basically what this is all about. So yes, leaders need to begin to show a great deal of tolerance, and that's at the heart of our conversation. Thank you.
I think what you said is redefining leadership might be something that we need to look at then, because I would say in this era that we're in this new decade, leadership needs the moral capacity to be able to be comfortable in your own skin and accept other people as well, regardless of, you know, the hierarchy or using that, because that's showing your insecurities in terms of, and we all have it, right? But redefining that term leadership, I think, is crucial from what you've said and something I hadn't thought about.
Fantastic. So there's another question from Juliet. She says, just concerned that many of us in this part of the world are just getting to know about the dramatic changes in the workplace. And I wonder where the line could be drawn between psychological safety in the workplace and the individual. I'm sorry, just, yes. Okay. I wonder where we could draw the line between psychological safety in the workplace and the individuals abusing the opportunities to express themselves. That's another angle.
So drawing the line between psychological safety and the individual need to express yourself. So I'm
the
wondering
abuses that may arise.
The abuses that may arise. Okay. So when you're creating psychological safety, and I will move, because I think that will come in around here with learner safety. I don't have a slide on that, but it's important here where you talk about giving and receiving feedback. So if you're giving and also receiving feedback is on both sides, right? If you're receiving feedback from someone who isn't constructive, who is dismissive, who is attacking the personality, now those are the levels of things that are not allowed. So with creating psychological safety, we're not diminishing accountability. We're not saying that there's still going to be a way around around giving and receiving feedback. There's still a way around managing people and dealing with people as humans. You're moving away from triggering the fear responses and triggering the defensive responses, and moving away to actually moving away for people to change the modes of performance, right? So I wouldn't say that psychological safety is giving people the leeway to, I don't know what the word you use in that question was, or you're not giving people the freedom to just act in any way. There is still that accountability. There's still that responsibility to draw the line between psychological safety and the happenings around in the workplace. So I wonder where the line could be drawn between psychological safety in the workplace and the happenings around one. So I think this is where if we have a scenario, a particular scenario, we can help with actually delineating and providing some actions that can be taken here. But you're not using psychological safety to create excuses, or you're not using that as a way of giving people the free way to act in any way in the workplace. No, there's still going to be decorum. There's still going to be acknowledging people. There's still in what we were talking about earlier, you're still trying to, whilst you're still encouraging the intellectual dissent, you still have to work on bringing out that social dissent in the workplace. So I hope that answers the question or provides some insight. It's not an excuse. I'm trying to find my slide. I'm going all over the place, but it's basically this slide here. This is it. We're not allowing that, so we're still bringing out the social friction. If it's that you found a disruptive person in your team, you need to take that person out and speak to them about how to communicate, how to give feedback. if you as a manager are not being that person as well, you need to know how to communicate to your team, because whilst we're encouraging the intellectual friction, we still want to bring down the social friction, and psychological safety is not a curtain to hide behind in attacking people's personality and giving feedback. For example, you're allowed to speak your mind, you're allowed to challenge the status quo, but we're not having this as a personality attack. We're not having this as an attack on someone's personality here. I'm hoping, Juliet, did that answer your question? If you have a specific scenario that you want to bring to the table, then we can discuss that as well, but you're not using this as an excuse.
Thank you very much. Further responses. Helen, thank you, Mr. Ajibade, for this impactful and inspiring lecture. Louis, thanks once again, Mr. Ajibade, for this very insightful, educative, and practical session. Adeyonyi Adeshino, the name rings a bell, doesn't it? Proud mother. You say, I think it's also cause for separating people from issues. Thank you for that contribution. And again, you add, I believe there must also be boundaries. Maybe I should call on you, Mrs. Adeyonyi Adeshino. Please share your thoughts with us, and Ajibade may also react to.
Thanks, Olumide. I sort of knew you were going to do that. Good afternoon, everyone. I was just putting those responses to the question raised by Professor Alo and Juliet, that in all of these, as much as we want to be engaging and as much as we want to promote diversity and inclusion in the work, I think the first way to go about this is to realize that once we get it into our head that it's always about the issue, not the person, then it makes it easier for people to be safe at work and to freely express themselves, because it's always about an issue and not necessarily about the person. But given Juliet's question as well, I mean, if you're looking at how to avoid abuse and all of that, I believe there must also be boundaries. You can't have inclusion, or you can't have an environment where everybody just, because you have the diversity or inclusion in your workplace, then you can run amok and do whatever you like. So there must be boundaries that will be set as well. Boundaries clearly understood by every member of the community, so it's not arbitrary. I think that would also be a good way to guard against any kind of abuse or going over the edge. So those were my comments.
Thank you very much.
Very well done. It feels good to have learned a few things from you this morning.
Oh, like they say. All right, so Ajibade, over to you again. Additional comments. And then we'll just take the last set of questions before we begin to formally round up. Please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree with the comments that was made there. And if we take it back to measuring psychological safety and the questions here as well, ultimately we need to remember that we're dealing with humans here, right? And if you're truly taking the concept of psychological safety as what it is, you're not using that to, you can't say you're being psychologically safe when you're rejecting people. You're not being psychological safe where you're deliberately acting in a way that undermines people's effort. So these are the key terms here, that it's still, there's still boundaries, yes. There's still, you're focusing on the issue. So when we talk about that intellectual friction, not the person. So if you look at the intellectual friction and the person is going to be on the social side. And at the core of it, we're all human. We want to matter. We want to feel included. And in creating that psychological space, a safety space, you're dealing with the human and making sure they matter. You're making sure that both ways, that level of respect is still adhered to and honored in that interaction as well.
Right. Thank you. You know that slide that you showed where there's and I don't know whether I should call it the matrix between intellectual friction and social friction. For me, yes, that's the key learning for me today. the ability to create an environment where there will be intellectual discussions, and we can allow that happen, those kind of frictions that happen because we're discussing, and everybody's allowed to bring something to the table. But then it's also about that line being drawn to ensure that we don't bring social confusion into the place. So meaning manners, behaviors, emotional safety must be guaranteed. So that's the critical balance that I have seen, and I think answers a lot of this latter bit of the questions that have arisen. And Jibade, I want to say thank you to you. I have tremendously gained from this. I have pretended that I didn't know you, and that's helped me learn. And so for me, I can say thumbs up. Let me have Venerable Adeshina, who I will introduce once more as proud father. Let's have your last words, and then we'll formally round this up.
Thank you very much, Olumide, for anchoring this very, very, very insightful session. Permit me to first thank our beloved Egbon, the immediate past Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos, Professor Jide Alo, for joining us from America. We had a pact that whenever is going to go on a foreign assignment, I will go on his behalf. And there's one coming up in November. I must thank my wife, Mrs. Adeyomi Adeshina. You've done a very good job, through God's grace, to have raised our children. Olumide says I'm a proud father. We're both proud parents. Let me answer my brother's question, Dr. Adelaja Adeshina. We have reached out to people in government with programs like this. I was privileged to present the lead paper at the National Productivity Summit on wellness, performance, productivity, and profits in organization. You and I know what it takes to deal with people in government. They are not readily receptive to ideas as this, but we're making effort. We've sent proposals to a number of houses of assemblies on governance and leadership, the model that we should have. Let's hope with time, they will embrace these laudable ideas and we can take things up from there. Ajibade, thank you very much for this session. You have created psychological insecurity for me rather than safety. Because what else should I be doing on the learning and development field if you are able to deliver such insightful sessions? You have hastened my retirement process. I need to start thinking of disengaging. Fortunately, Professor Alo has given me an opportunity to do all his foreign travels for him. I guess I need to retire into that. Thank you very much, son. I'm indeed very proud of you. I've had comments from friends all over the world as to how your delivery, I had a delivery in South Africa where I was even awarded as a thought leader and a global influential in EAP. But I'm told your delivery outperformed mine. We're proud of you. We're going to bring you back. A thought came to me, redefining leadership, maybe what you will be addressing for us in due course. We're also going to try and bring your brother on the Connect and Learn series. I want to thank everybody from the different corners of the world, especially our African friends who have joined from Ghana, Uganda, South Africa, Kenya, Lesotho. Thank you very much. Thank you, Olumide, for. And I must thank the people behind the scene, my staff, Dayo and Sheung, who worked tirelessly to put this together. Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you at the October Connect and Learn series. Thank you and God bless you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's been a pleasure to have been the anchor. Let's thank Sages and Scribes consultants for putting this together. Wonderful initiative. Let's thank once more our guest speaker, Ajibade Adesina. Brilliant submissions, and of course, great learnings. One of the things that I was also going to just use as a last word here would be a great deal of these learnings can actually be situated even in our personal spaces, within our families, within our work groups, because that's the way we can build a better society. Truth is, how many of our children are psychologically safe? And I think these learnings can happen. How many of our friends in our various little groups are? So there's a lot we can do with this, workplaces and other spaces. So let's go and be the best that we can be. Till we come your way again in October, on behalf of Sages and Scribe Consultants, Olumide Ajumale, I am, and I'd like to sign out and say thank you very much for being part of this. See you.
Thanks,
God
everyone.
bless you all.